Welkom by 'n baie spesiale uitsending wat ons praat oor allerlei ekonomiese aangeleenthede. Die ekonomie is van opperste belang in hierdie tyd en dit is juist nou groot onsekerheid, grootskaalse nuwe stappe wat geneem word deur die regering. En so ek is baie bevoorreg vandag om daai aangeleenthede en 'n paar ander te bespreek met Dawie Roodt. Baie welkom Dawie.
Baie dankie. Goeiemôre Daniel.
And of course we've got our very special guest Russell Lamberti here as well. Hi Russell.
Baie dankie Daniel.
Well, time is of the essence, so I think let's just jump right into it and discuss a couple of things that emerged today. So, as you might have heard, Minister Mboweni, ekskuus, ek gaan sommer oorskakel Afrikaans toe. Ons het met Russell uitgeklaar, hy sê dis reg. Ons sal met hom in Engels praat, maar so tussen die twee tale wissel. Ekskuus, ek was half in gedagte gewees. So ons het vandag gehoor van Minister Mboweni se nuutste planne rondom sy stimuluspakket wat hy vir ons te bedien het. Dawie, kan ek vra, het jy enige eerste indrukke wat jy wil maak rondom dit?
Ja, maar net so vinnig saamvat, ek het geluister na die minister vandag en daar's niks nuuts gewees nie, ek het net sy persverklaring deurgelees. Ons het nou al die goeders al gehoor, hy het dit net alles soort van opgesom en hy het verduidelik van die onderskeie belasting toegewings. Ons moet baie mooi verstaan, hierdie is nie 'n belastingverligtings nie, dit is 'n belastinguitstel net. Jy is veronderstel om nog steeds al die belastings te betaal, maar hy het dit nou mooi uitgepak. Die verskillende belastings en hoe die uitstel werk en waar jy kan aansoek doen en daardie tipe van goeders en dit is inderdaad die bedoeling van hierdie belasting vrystellings of ten minste uitstel dan is sekerlik om besighede en individue te help met hulle kontantvloei. So hy het dit mooi uitgepak en dit is vir ons duidelik gemaak waar dit alles vandaan kom. Toe die minister ook nog 'n groot ding daarvan gemaak om ons te vertel dat die werklike totale stimuluspakket is 800 miljard rand. Nou ek moet hom verskil, want dit is net eenvoudig nie waar nie. Dit is nie 800 miljard rand nie en daar's verskeie redes hoekom ek so sê. En ons kan miskien bietjie die stimuluspakket wat hy aangekondig het, kan ons miskien so bietjie of wat aangekondig is deur die president kan ons miskien so bietjie beter bespreek. Maar ek dink wat vir my ook belangrik was en dit is eintlik die deel wat my die meeste opgeval het, is dat ons ken vir Mboweni. Hy het nogal 'n manier om so bietjie soos hulle sê afskrip te gaan en opmerkings op die kant te maak en hy het 'n paar inderdaad van hierdie opmerkings gemaak. Nou onthou nou, Suid-Afrika se ekonomie is in 'n baie diep krisis. Ons weet dat ons politieke leiers is voortdurend besig met vergaderings om besluite te neem en besluite te maak en baie groot besluite te maak soos wat ons nou gehoor het die afgelope tyd. En ek het nogal so 'n soort van 'n in my geestesoog sien ek nogal hoe hulle by mekaar kom, waarskynlik met elektroniese media soos wat ons nou doen en dan praat hulle oor hierdie vreeslike verskriklike belangrike goed wat aan die gebeur is, mense wat honger ly, mense wat hulle werke gaan verloor en dan dink hulle nou hierdie goeders uit wat hulle gedoen het en baie van die goeders met 'n proses stem ons mee saam. Maar toe maak hy nou opmerkings so 'n soort van soos ek sê afskrip en hierdie opmerkings het my absoluut verstom, die tipe van goed. Dan gaan ek 'n paar goed wat hy gesê het gaan ek so vinnig nou noem. Ons gaan 'n nuwe vervaardigingsbasis in Suid-Afrika tot stand bring. Want ons voer al die goederes van China af in en ons het nodig om 'n nuwe vervaardigingsbasis hier in Suid-Afrika tot stand te bring. Dis nou wat hy gesê het. En ek parafraseer so 'n bietjie. Ons gaan dit tot stand bring, maar die onderliggende boodskap is die regering gaan goeders doen om 'n vervaardigingsbedryf in Suid-Afrika aan die gang te sit. Nou die rede hoekom is nie 'n vervaardigingsbedryf het nie en hoekom is dit verloor, is reeds van die goeders wat die regering gedoen het. Nou gaan ons nou iets aan die gang sit. Nog 'n ding wat hy net so terloops genoem het. Hierdie is terloopse goeders. Nuwe residensiële areas wat tot stand gebring word op plekke. So die regering gaan nou nuwe residensiële areas identifiseer en iets doen daarmee. Hy gaan ook, en dis die ding wat my hare absoluut regop staan, uit die as, soos ek gesê, the ashes of South African Airways, gaan 'n nuwe lugdiens herrys. Dis Mboweni hierdie ou, né? Dis nou Mboweni wat nou nie te lank terug vir ons gesê het dat ons moet hierdie goed toemaak nie en hulle moet op hulle eie finansiële beheer staan. Sê nou ewe skielik dat daar gaan 'n nuwe lugdiens tot stand kom en gaan herrys uit die as van Suid-Afrikaanse lugdiens. Ek meen, praat hierdie mense oor Suid-Afrikaan oor lugdienste terwyl mense nie kos het om te eet. Dan praat ons nou van 'n nuwe landbouorganisasie wat idle land gaan identifiseer en gaan besluit hoe dit aangewend gaan word om seker nou maar die politici in die toekoms gaan besluit hoe grond aangewend gaan word. En nog 'n ding. Hy sê vir my, hy sê vir ons daarso dat as jy nou in 'n restaurant instap is 10 of 8 uit die 10 is nie Suid-Afrikaners waar daar werk nie. En in die toekoms, as jy 'n lisensie wil hê by 'n restaurant lisensie en ek is weer 'n keer besig om te parafraseer hierso, maar moet jy 'n bankrekening hê en jy moet aantoon dat jy verteenwoordigend Suid-Afrikaners in diens neem, byvoorbeeld. Hier's nog 'n kwota. So BEE is nou nie genoeg van 'n kwota nie. Hier is nou Suid-Afrikaners en nie Suid-Afrikaners wat ook deel word van 'n kwota en jy moet 'n bankrekening hê en jy moet 'n lisensie en jy moet hier en daai en so het. En ek het werklik verstom gestaan oor die totale metamorfose wat Tito Mboweni ondergaan het in 'n kort tydjie van iemand wat geveg het vir ekonomiese rasionele ekonomiese beleid, vir verantwoordelike finansiële bestuur. Is daar ewe skielik iemand wat praat van 'n nuwe lugdiens wat gaan herrys in die as van Suid-Afrikaanse lugdiens. Dis my net so kort agtergrond en dis die deel wat my werklik eintlik geskok het vandag om te hoor dat Tito Mboweni van alle mense waaraan ek soveel hoop gehad het, dat hy hierdie tipe van goed kwyt geraak.
Dis ongelooflik, nee. Dis amper te sê dis baie soos wat die ANC gewoonlik is. Dis 'n baie ANC tiperige beleid, maar is ongelukkig half 'n ekstra hoë rad nou in hierdie omstandighede. Now, Russell, there are a number of questions around this funding. So I think Dawie's mentioned a couple of interesting policy responses. Interesting is putting it mildly. Government is considering in light of this crisis. Before we get to that, because I think that's worth spending a section of this program on, what do you think about, say, for instance, what is our position? What's our fiscal space? What are the resources that we can actually muster in this crisis? And do you think government has a realistic idea of what it actually has the power to do?
Yeah, that's a good question, Daniel. I just firstly want to reflect on very quickly on what Davie's just said, and he's absolutely right to be focusing on the things that were said off script, and I think it's those things that we've got to be really, really worried about. And I think we're seeing a classic case of central planners not wanting to waste a crisis here, and we've got to be really, really concerned about that. At the same time, to your question to me, I don't think that there's a full appreciation yet. I don't sense that there's a full appreciation yet of just how bad things could get in the next few months. I would have thought that there would be. It may just be the case that they are starting to realize in National Treasury how bad it's going to get, and perhaps now this is why they're starting to come up with some big numbers, 500 billion, 800 billion. As Dawie says, that's not really true. A lot of it is repurposed spending. And when you get down to the nuts and bolts, look, they still want to borrow some more money. By February this year, we were already almost on our knees from a fiscal perspective. They were forecasting extremely big budget deficits already. So we just don't really have the space. And of course, this whole thing comes down to needing to strip government down by 30, 40, 50% to dramatically reduce the size of the state. Government, as I keep saying, needs to go through a big recession, and it hasn't done that for many decades. So I don't think that they're fully aware just of how big a crisis this is. And bear in mind, you can't bail everyone out. When the system is broken everywhere, it has to repair itself in the normal economic way, which is that prices have to adjust, resources have to adjust, and you grow from there. So I just don't think that the fiscal approach is really that meaningful, to be honest. I don't think we can borrow our way out of this problem. We can, and there's some very bad case scenarios if we try and keep going down this road. One of them being printing money, right? That's the end game potentially down one of these roads, is we're going to print a whole lot of money. We don't want to go there. So I just think that there's huge concern. And last point, and just to echo Dawie, it really is critical that we focus now on the words that are being used: a new economy, radical economic transformation, coming in with quotas, for restaurants and for domestic versus foreign, workers and so on. Very, very concerning, and it suggests to me that our ability to recover from this recession that we're in, and that's going to get worse for the next few months, our ability to recover from it is going to be very, very weak. And I think it's going to take a long time to recover.
Dawie, voordat ek nou by Dawie weer terug uitkom, ek dink ek wil net vinnig die punt maak vir ons kykers. Julle is meer as welkom om ook kommentaar van hierdie vrae te stel aan die sprekers ensovoorts. Ons sal 'n tydjie vandag afstaan ook daardie kwessies te hanteer. Ek sien 'n paar mense het al kommentaar gelewer. Gaan gerus so voort. Die idee is juist dat hierdie 'n interaktiewe sessie is, dat ons al mooi hierdie situasie kan uitpraat. Nou Dawie, Russell het 'n paar baie interessante punte genoem. Is dit dalk van daai waarop jy wil reageer, maar meer in
Ja,
besonder uitgepraat oor die moontlikheid van gelddruk. Sê dalk vir ons kykers 'n idee gee van wat presies dit sal behels. Is dit wel iets wat kan gebeur en hoe groot is ons risiko's?
ja, ek wil graag aansluit by die fiskale syfers wat Russell genoem het. Ek het 'n paar sommetjies gemaak en ek wil dit graag deel. Ek wil graag hoor wat sê Russell vir my sommetjies wat gemaak het. Maar kom ek hanteer vinnig die gelddruk situasie. Onthou ons lewe in 'n moderne finansiële stelsel en of jy nou daarmee saamstem of nie, dis nou nie wat ek gaan debatteer hier nie, maar hoe dit werk is dat basies druk sentrale banke geld en sentrale banke druk geld uit niks uit nie. En dis nie nooit wel, ek moet nou versigtig wees want ek weet ek sit hier met 'n klomp vrye markiers om die tafel, maar dis nie noodwendig verkeerd nie, want baie keer gebeur dit dat die sentrale banke geld druk in die normale loop van besigheid, in die normale loop van dag tot dag wyse waarop finansies en finansiële stelsels bestuur word. Maar daar's iets wat van 'n klemverskil nou gewees en dit is dat die Reserwebank het besluit dat hy in die sekondêre mark betrokke gaan begin raak. En ek moet sê dis 'n klemverskil want dit was nog altyd daar gewees. Maar die Reserwebank gaan dit nou doen met 'n spesifieke doel voor oë en dit is om likwiditeit verskaf. Dit sê hulle. Nou jong, dis 'n bitter dun lyntjie tussen likwiditeit verskaf en tydelik en ander woorde soos byvoorbeeld quantitative easing of gelddruk of wat ook al. So daar's 'n baie bitter en dis eintlik maar net 'n subtiele klemverskil tussen hierdie goed. Hulle is baie dieselfde. Ek dink nie ons is daar nie. Ek dink nie dit is werklik waar 'n gevaar nie. Ek dink Lesotho kan ja goed doen onder omstandighede 'n goeie job. Ek ondersteun die wyse waarop hy monetêre beleid verander het. Ek sou graag wil hoor wat dink Russell. Maar die groot gevaar is, die vraag is eintlik gaan hy dit regkry om terug te tree na die krisis. En dis is die toets en dit is die groot gevaar. En ek wil graag hoor wat is Russell se opmerking daarmee. Maar op hierdie stadium dink ek geld druk in die sin van modern monetary theory byvoorbeeld. Ek dink nie dit is 'n gevaar vir nou nie, dit kan vorentoe. En nou ja, dit is ek dink dit gaan 'n gevaar word vorentoe. Maar vir nou is dit nie 'n probleem. Dan net 'n paar syfers wat ek miskien net wil noem, en 'n bietjie vleis te gee aan die opmerkings wat Russell gemaak het. Ek het gaan kyk na die fiskale rekeninge. Nou aanvanklik was die fiskale tekort begroot om so 6,8% van BBP te wees. Nou, ek wil nie te tegnies maak, kos noem dit 7%. Die minister van Finansies het beplan om 7% van die ekwivalent van die ekonomie te leen in die huidige finansiële jaar. Die realiteit nou is, en dit was ook heeltemal te konservatief, sou baie erger gewees het. Nou dit was alreeds 'n krisis. Nou dit is 'n krisis op 'n krisis. Nou hier's 'n paar syfers. Die staat se inkomste in die huidige finansiële jaar. Onthou daar's 'n klompie toegewings gegee. Maar dit gaan uiteindelik lei tot laer belastingontvangste. Nie net dit nie, die ekonomie is onder geweldig baie druk. So die staat se inkomste aan die huidige finansiële jaar kan maklik in die omgewing van 200 miljard of selfs 300 miljard rand minder wees as die aanvanklike begroting. Dit bring jou fiskale tekort op na sê net maar 10% van BBP. Dan het jy beplan die staat om 'n klompie ekstra uitgawes aan te gaan, wat nie alles werklik is nie, maar sê net maar 200 miljard of so. En dit bring jou fiskale tekort na sê net maar 13% of so van BBP. Rowweg, hierdie syfers is alles rowweg. Want niemand weet werklik wat aangaan nie. Dit is 'n nuwe wêreld waarin ons osself bevind vandag. En dan het jy 'n ekonomie wat gaan krimp met sê net maar 6, 7, 8%, party ons sê 10%. So relatief tot die ekonomie of relatief tot BBP, gaan die fiskale tekort wees 16, 17%. Hoe kies 'n syfer, 'n reusagtige syfer. Wat onvermydelik beteken dat die skuldvlakke van die staat, wat nou staan op bykans wat 65%, dat ons praat van staatsskuldvlakke van by die 80% van BBP binne die volgende sê net maar jare of 18 maande word. En nou sluit ons nog nie eens Eskom in nie. So die staat se skuld styg teen 'n tempo van 10, 15, miskien selfs 20% per jaar. Dis 'n ramp waarop ons afstuur. Dis 'n totale ramp, want ernstig moet daardie geld terugbetaal. En ek is bevrees as ons teen hierdie tempo aangaan met goeder soos byvoorbeeld voorgeskrewe bates, dit gaan baie ernstig genoem word. Goed soos valutebeheer regulasies onder sulke omstandighede word baie meer aantreklik. En natuurlik uiteindelik goeder soos om geld te druk uit niks uit nie, want dit lei tot inflasie en inflasie betaal eintlik jou skuld af. So ja, daar's 'n paar opmerkings oor die fiskale rekeninge en oor geld.
Could I just, if I could just come in there quickly. So firstly to say, Davie's numbers there sound absolutely spot on. We're thinking very similarly in that regard. 15% of GDP, 17% of GDP, all very, very possible. I think because it's going to get up or has the potential to become such a big deficit, I think that's precisely why some of the scenarios that we ordinarily wouldn't entertain, like dramatic and excessive money printing to buy government bonds and so on. One of the reasons why that becomes possible is because the deficit is now so desperate and so large. And so it's not only that money printing becomes an option, it's that tapping into pension savings becomes an option, exchange controls become an option, because it's desperate times. And I think because it's desperate times, we mustn't rule out monetary financing of the deficit. Now, to Davie's point, very, very quickly, the central bank system liquefied and to basically run the financial system. And by and large, that's fine. It's maybe not the best system. I'm just going to wait for my internet to connect here. So in normal times, the central bank prints, creates a little bit of currency, liquefies the financial system. In times like this, it can move to outright what we call monetary financing of the fiscus, or quasi-fiscal monetary policy. And what that means for your viewers is essentially that the central bank effectively gives money that it prints to the government. Now, it might do that through some instruments, through buying government bonds, and through various financially sophisticated ways. But that's essentially what happens, and there is a risk of that in this crisis. We're seeing it starting to happen overseas. And the South African Reserve Bank, who I agree is well managed by Lesetja Kganyago, who I've got a lot of respect for, actually, as a central banker. But my fear is that we start importing these ideas from overseas, from the G20, and that we might move into that realm. Now, I don't think Lesetja necessarily, Mr. Kganyago, wants to do that, but there might be overwhelming political pressure if this crisis gets bad enough. And I'm concerned that that's the direction we could be heading in.
Uitstekend. As ek vinnig hierso kan inbreek, ek dink ons is so net na kwart oor. Ek dink dis dalk tyd om een of twee vinnige vrae te vat van ons lesers. Ek dink hierso is dalk een wat ons dalk vinnig kan bespreek. Johan Notnagel gevra, Dawie, gee asseblief meer duidelikheid oor waarom jy sê dat die 800 miljard waarna die minister van Finansies verwys nie korrek is nie.
Ja, Russell, jy moet my help oor die monetêre gedeelte, want op die manier het die Reserwebank gesê hulle het ek weet nie hoeveel miljard rand se stimulasie geskep in die ekonomie, en hulle het dit gedoen deur rentekoerse te verlaag onder andere, en natuurlik die likwiditeitsvereistes van banke en die kapitaalvereistes van banke te aan te pas en so aan. Daardie sommetjie het ek gemaak, en ek weet nie hoe die monetêre syfers bereken is nie. As Russell my kan help daarmee, sal ek baie bly wees. Wat die fiskale pakket dan betref, en dit is die 500 miljard rand, kan ek so rolweg net die belangrikstes van hulle uitlig. 200 miljard rand daarvan, die is waarborge wat aan banke verskaf gaan word, en hierdie waarborge, dis nie geld nie, dis nie geld wat spandeer geword nie, dit kan miskien in die toekoms spandeer word, as wanneer die lening suur raak, maar dis waarborge wat met die samewerking van die Reserwebank, maar dit is op die ou end is dit eintlik die belastingbetaler wat gaan moet instaan vir hierdie waarborg, maar dis 'n waarborg aan banke, en ons sê vir die banke leen geld aan maatskappye, en as die maatskappy nie die geld terugbetaal nie, sal die staat die geld terugbetaal. So die geld is nog nie gespandeer nie. Dis net 'n waarborg waar hulle lê. Nog 'n goeie voorbeeld is miskien die 130 miljard rand van staatsuitgawes wat al klaar voor begroot is, maar dit gaan nou net geherkanaliseer word na ander goederes. So dis nie nuwe geld nie, dis net geld wat geherkanaliseer word na ander goederes. Dan is daar 100 miljard rand van staats vir geld wat gebruik gaan word om werk te skep en werke te beskerm. Baie van die geld is eintlik al reeds aangekondig, en dit is in die werkloosheidsversekeringsfonds, en dis so 40 miljard rand, en dis miskien 'n gedeelte daarvan is dan nou sogenaamde nuwe geld. Maar dan is daar inderdaad ook nuwe geld, regte geld, soos byvoorbeeld die 20 miljard rand wat aangekondig is vir die invoer van sekere mediese goederes, maar daai geld gaan natuurlik na die buiteland toe, so dis nie ons wat die voordeel daaruit gaan kry nie, ons kry net die voordeel in terme van die gebruik van die invoere wat ons gaan kry, en 'n 20 miljard rand wat gegee word aan die munisipaliteite om te help met watervoorsiening en behuising en dies meer. En dis die verkeerste ouens om geld voor te gee, want hulle is finansiëel, die heel meeste van hulle word uiters swak bestuur. So daar is inderdaad 'n klompie nuwe geld wat gespandeer gaan word, maar dis nie 500 miljard. En baie van dit is reeds aangekondig, en baie van dit is dubbeltelling, maar 500 miljard versekerlik is dit.
So it might be a good time to, sorry, Daniel, it might be a good time to talk about what Dawie was saying there with the Reserve Bank, and how they believe they have created stimulus in the economy. And again, without getting too technical, let's just think of the banking system as a system that obviously provides finance to the economy, and it is a system that is constrained in the sense that banks can't just lend whatever they like and how much ever they like. They're constrained by how much equity and capital they have. If they lend too much against that pool of capital, they get into trouble. And the central bank forces the banks to hold a certain amount of capital relative to how much they lend. Now, what the Reserve Bank, and that constrains, that's one of the things at least, that constrains bank lending. Of course, the other thing that constrains bank lending is not just actual capital, but is the risk of making the new loans. What the government has done is it's eased those capital requirements for the banks. It's actually reduced that regulatory capital requirement, which is to say, now the capital doesn't shrink, the capital stays the same, but they can grow the loans bigger on top of that capital. And they've guaranteed about 200 billion rands worth of bank loans, which is to say to the banks, go and make rescue finance, really, go and help businesses and households. So it's a funny one, because in a way, the Reserve Bank is asking the private sector, the banks, to go and do the bailouts, to go and bail out the economy. And it's not necessarily the worst idea, because the banks understand their client base and they understand their market better than the central bank does, or better than the government does. Of course, the problem comes in that what this Reserve Bank is really asking the banks to do is make their balance sheets more risky. It's actually asking them to go and up-risk their balance sheets to make very dangerous loans into a very, very bad economy. And I think that's the concern. And then they're guaranteeing 200 billion rand of that, but they're actually asking the banks to do as much as 500 billion rand of new lending. And they may have to guarantee more of that for the banks to actually go and do that. So that's where that money comes from. It's the SARB, it's the Reserve Bank actually guaranteeing and reducing capital requirements. They did print a bit of money at the end of March, which they lent to the banks, about 50 billion rand, which went into the money markets for the banks, which helps the banks further to expand lending into the economy. But that's basically how it's working. So as of now, the central bank is not itself going out and bailing out the economy with printing money or anything like that. It's asking the banks to do it, and it will be the backstop to the banks.
So fundamenteel, as ek die benadering reg verstaan, is daar 'n idee van ons stoot basies geld in die ekonomie in om daardeur miskien iets soos 'n aanvraag weer te herstel in die ekonomie. Wat kan ons sê oor die algemene strategie wat die regering tans volg? Is dit 'n sinvolle ene? Is daar beter maniere miskien van dit aanpak? Kan ons ook sommer by jou begin, Dawie?
Ja, Daniel, ek dink dankie Russell for that explanation. It makes a lot of sense. But I think wat baie belangrik is om te verstaan, ek wil net iets byvoeg oor monetêre beleid wat Russell nou mooi vir ons verduidelik het. En dit is in monetêre beleid kan jy altyd, as jy praat van monetêre beleid, en dit is wat die Reservebank doen, kan jy altyd mense verhoed om geld te leen uiteindelik. En jy kan dit doen deur net eenvoudig geld so verskriklik duur te maak, met ander woorde rentekoerse te verhoog dat mense naderhand nie meer leen. En dan hou hulle op leen. En dan is die vraag na geld, kan mense nou maar sê, neem na krediet, neem nou af, en alles wat daarmee saamgaan. Maar die teenoorgestelde is nie noodwendig waar nie. Met ander woorde, as jy wil hê mense moet geld leen, en mense voel baie onseker oor goed, dan hou hulle op om geld te leen, selfs al daal rentekoerse tot 0 toe. En dis waar die Europeërs is, en dis waar die Amerikaners is, en baie ander lande in die wêreld. Nou, ons is nie by 0 nie, en dan rentekoerse kan nog baie daal in Suid-Afrika voor ons by 0 is. Maar sonder twyfel gaan mense baie huiwerig wees om geld te leen onder hierdie tipe van omstandighede, want ons is net eenvoudig onseker. Veral duursame goedere, soos karre en huise en so, gaan mense waarskynlik nie koop onder hierdie omstandighede nie. En dit is dan een van die redes, soos Russell verduidelik het, hoekom die sentrale bank uit sy pad uitgaan om dit maklik te maak vir banke om geld uit te leen. Maar dit beteken nie die mense gaan die geld leen nie. So daar's nog geen stimulus. Die kapasiteit is geskep om te stimuleer indien die vraag na krediet daar is, maar die vraag na krediet is nog nie daar gewees nie. Ons het miskien of dit van gebeur. So dis 'n belangrike ding. Maar wat die Reservebank kan betref, moet ek grootlik sê dat ek stem breedweg saam met die Reservebank se benadering, monetêre beleidsbenadering, en dan wil ek sommer ook byvoeg dat die Reservebank kon goeders doen, soos byvoorbeeld om rentekoerse te verlaag, omdat hy in die verlede monetêre beleid relatief stram gehou het. So daar was droë ammunisie beskikbaar geweest. Hy kon dit doen. Anders as die fiskale owerhede. As gevolg van die wanbestuur van die staat se finansies in die verlede, het ons nou bitter minder ruimte om die staat se syfers, die staat se rekeninge te gebruik om die ekonomie te ondersteun, want ons is alreeds in 'n sogenaamde skuldstruk of baie naby daaraan. Daarom kry jy nou 'n sogenaamde 500 miljard se stimulasie, maar daar's geen stimulasie of baie min stimulasie in werklikheid wat ons eintlik nodig het. En weet ek wil nie in 'n ideologiese debat gaan nie, maar eintlik wat ons nou nodig het, is eintlik 'n reusagtige stimulasie van die staat se kant af. Sê nou maar iets in die omgewing van 5 of 6 of 7 of selfs 'n triljoen rand van die staat se kant af in 'n poging om die ekonomie te ondersteun, maar ons kan dit nie doen nie, want ons het nie meer ruimte nie as gevolg van die wanbestuur van die staat se finansies in die verlede. So daar's die kort antwoord. Die monetêre owerhede doen nie sleg nie. Ek dink ek is tevrede met hulle optrede. Die vraag is, gaan hulle kan terugtreë wanneer nodig? Maar die fiskale owerhede het net eenvoudig nie meer ruimte nie as gevolg van die wanbestuur in die verlede.
Russell, thoughts on your side?
Look, I just wanted to jump on to some of what Dawie said there. At the end of the day, the only true stimulus that we can actually bring here is ending the lockdown. We're talking about monetary and fiscal policy. We're talking about the need to borrow more money potentially and maybe make interest rates lower. And certainly there's a case to be made that interest rates could decline through this, certainly through, at least for a short period through this crisis. There's a case to be made that it's good business practice for the banks to extend the terms of their loans, to help their customers not to default to them. I think there's a case to be made for tax cuts and actually spending cuts by the government. I think that would free up private sector resources to start repairing. But none of that means anything if you have to sit at home. None of that means anything if you can't actually operate your business.
Yeah.
None of that means anything because at the end of the day, the problem we face here is we're not producing anymore. There's too many sectors not producing, and production is the essence of how we begin to trade with one another. It's what creates our ability to buy something because we produce something and then we offer it onto the marketplace. And if no one is doing that, if we're all sitting at home, you can print all the money you like. You can provide financing. You can provide low interest rates. You can borrow $1 trillion more rand from the IMF if you want. We have to get out of our houses and actually start producing. And I think that's, for me, what's so concerning, and maybe we'll talk about it now, but what's so concerning about this exit strategy, this lockdown exit strategy that the president sort of outlined fairly vaguely, actually, but sort of outlined for us last night. I've looked at that exit strategy that they're talking about, and it's really concerning to me because it looks like not much is going to change in May. Lockdown for most people stays the same, and I just don't think we can afford that.
I think this is an opportune moment to discuss a bit of policy. So, as you may know, if you're watching this, the government has taken an approach of basically identifying certain sectors which are allowed to operate during the lockdown. We're still waiting to see exactly how the government is actually going to regulate post-lockdown, but all indications are we're going to have a phased approach, which similarly identifies specific sectors which are allowed to operate. Now, from Sakeliga's side, we are very concerned because what that seems to do, and I'd like to hear Russell and Davie's thoughts on this, is it seems to create a bottleneck where government finally becomes the economic decision maker. Government is actually the one adjudicating on risk and deciding how business is allowed to continue and what business is allowed to continue. Now, whether or not you agree with the idea that that should be government's place, you have a practical problem. Fundamentally, that government just isn't capable of making all those decisions in the amount of time that we need it to do so. So, Russell, you've suggested an interesting approach. ETM Analytics and ETM Macro Advisors, which you are affiliated with, have suggested an interesting policy, and a number of organizations, and Dawie, you yourself, and Sakeliga have actually subscribed to it. Would you mind just giving us a short overview of what does the policy mean and how does it compare to the present approach?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So I think very simply what we're talking about. So we've come from an approach so far in this lockdown, which is a essential versus non-essential goods and services approach. And it's got a lot of flaws to it. And it's, of course, led to this very draconian, very dramatic lockdown where over 1 million jobs are probably lost already, and the economy is grinding to a halt. So we favor what we would call more a risk-based approach. Now, what's interesting about that is that the government are talking about a risk-based approach as well. And so I must distinguish between the two because they are actually very, very different. The way I will distinguish between them is to say that the government's approach is better described as a sector risk approach. And what that means is that they are identifying sectors. Now, sectors are just categorizations of types of economic activity. And people must understand that although we can conceptually think about sectors, in practice, it's very, very difficult to delineate economic activity by sectors. And many times we try and do this, we actually realize that companies are much more complex and they fit into different sector buckets, and it's not a very easy thing to delineate. So the first problem with the sector risk approach is that companies don't neatly fit into sectors. You might think that a company is in a certain sector, but it might have different divisions that operate in other sectors, and it might do things in a very complicated way that doesn't lend itself to an easy definition. So that's the first point, is that I think we can get confusion. The second point is that there's no such thing as one sector risk. The food manufacturing sector doesn't have one kind of risk to the coronavirus, because the companies within that sector are very, very different. There's big companies and small companies, and companies that use lots of technology, and other companies use lots of labor. And some companies employ maybe lots of old people, and some companies are going to employ very young people. Those all have very, very different risk profiles for the coronavirus. And the third problem with the sector risk approach is the same as the essentials versus non-essentials approach, which is that in the essentials, non-essentials approach, essential services who rely on non-essential supply and demand to keep their business going, many of them couldn't operate, or many of them have been struggling to operate or going out of business because their clients are non-essential services. And the same thing would happen with the sector risk approach. A sector, a company that can operate on level 4 might have half of their business relying on companies in level 3 or level 2 who can't yet operate. So what you're doing is you're breaking supply and demand linkages between companies in the economy. Final point on the government's idea, and then I'll contrast it with ours. On top of this complexity of sector risk, okay, which is really unworkable in my view, they're layering over 5 levels of risk alert, okay, that they want to be able to dial up or down depending on the risk of coronavirus. Well, the first problem with that is that no company is going to take meaningful investment, hiring, operational decisions if they are unsure how long they can operate for. If the government can flick the switch next month, your first result of this is that investment levels are going to have already plummeted and are going to stay very low. You're not going to get new investment levels. You're not going to get new investment growth. The second problem, of course, with this 5 risk level approach is that they want to now disaggregate it into the different provinces and then districts within the different provinces. Now, we know that business in South Africa takes place across districts, across provinces. So you're going to have someone who's able to run their business in a district, but then they can't deliver their product to someone else in another district, and if they do, they're breaking the law. And how and you're not going to know, no one even knows where the district boundaries are. So this is just, what this really is, guys, is central planning deluxe. This is all sorts of ways for the government to tweak buttons and pull levers and control access to production. And you know what that's called? That's called socialism. What we're staring at here, guys, make no mistake, is a version of socialism. It's a modern, strange, virus-inflicted version of a kind of state socialism. What we are proposing in a risk-based approach is much simpler, which is to say, you identify a few very sensible dimensions of risk to the coronavirus. For example, having too many people in a certain area can be a risk to transmission. Having people that are old and unwell in the workforce or involved in a production process. So very old people who happen to still be working, who may be at risk, a higher risk of the coronavirus, they can be quarantined, they can stay at home. So you actually make, you just make a few protocols around risk management, and then you open up the entire economy and you allow businesses to adhere to those risk protocols. It's a much, much simpler approach. It's not saying we're going to go sector by sector and business by business, which is just a bureaucratic nightmare. You're saying everyone can produce, provided you adhere to these rules. Now, of course, it matters what those rules are. Okay? And we don't propose what those rules should be in our paper. It was, that's perhaps the next part of our scope and what we want to talk about. It may be a little bit out of our expertise, but nonetheless, those rules need to be enforceable and they need to be tolerable. Businesses need to be able to actually be able to follow them. If you have to do a 20-minute health check on every employee every morning, that's not viable. That's simply not viable. So there has to be some sensible risk management practices, but then basically you allow businesses to fit into that strategy. So if a business is currently deemed too risky, let's say it's got too many staff on the floor that are too close to one another, it might have a strategy of expanding into another office or another warehouse, or maybe it will leave some staff at home. Perhaps the older staff will be on some sort of a retainer while they remain at home. Companies can innovate around those risk guidelines. And what this does is it greatly simplifies everything from a bureaucracy perspective. It opens up the economy again in a safe way. You can of course limit some travel and some public transport, but even aviation, even flying can open up under this strategy. So I'm going to end there because you can come with a few more questions, Daniel, and maybe Davie's got some comments. But it just simplifies the whole risk management dynamic.
Dawie, do you have any comments?
Ja, ek sou graag net daarby wil, miskien net so ander, natuurlik stem ek heeltemal met Russell saam. Dit is heeltemal reg wat hy daar so sê. Ek wil net iets byvoeg wat miskien so 'n bietjie van 'n politieke kleur het hierso. Onder hierdie omstandighede word nou baie 'n vreeslike klomp mag word gegee aan bureaukrate en aan politici, en hulle kan nou besluit, en hulle doen hierdie besluit. Hulle kan besluit of ek gekookte hoender mag koop of nie. Dit grens aan die belaglike. Maar hulle kan hierdie tipe van belaglike besluite kan neem. Hulle kan besluit of ek nou mag sigarette koop of nie, en of ek mag drank koop of nie, en of ek nou van A tot B mag ry of nie. So dit is nou allerlei besluite en magte wat in die hande van politici geplaas word. En hulle gaan nou uiteindelik besluit hoe tot hoe mate hulle nou die ekonomie oopmaak. Nou, ek kan nou vir jou die versekering gee dan. As ons nou uiteindelik deur hierdie krisis kom, en ek weet nie manne dit eendag gaan wees nie, maar as ons nou uiteindelik aan die ander kant kom, kan ek jou absoluut die versekering gee dat daardie politici en daardie bureaukrate wat hierdie klomp mag nou gekry het, gaan daai mag nie vrywillig teruggee. En dit is die dilemma waarmee ons gesit na die tyd. Selfs veronderstel ons dat die besluite wat hulle neem die regte besluite is, wat ek nie dink die inderdaad die geval is nie. Maar selfs al verneem ons dit aan, kan ek vir jou die versekering gee. Dit gaan 'n geveg wees. Kom ek gee vir jou 'n voorbeeld. Sê hulle het alreeds gesê dat, en dit is so, ek wil nie almal met hom argumenteer nie, hierdie drankverbod het daartoe gelei dat daar minder mense vermoor word en dies meer, maar hy het sommer al klaar gesê dat dit werk vir hom so goed, hy dink hy gaan dit sommer verleng na die tyd. So wat nou verder? Gaan hulle sommer die rookverbod ook verder verleng, en dan gaan ons sommer in die toekoms vir ons ook sê wanneer ons mag ry en waar ons mag ry en dies meer. Dis die gevaar. En dit beteken net een ding, is dat Suid-Afrika waarskynlik na hierdie ding sonder twyfel meer politieke intervensie gaan sien, en as hierdie tendens aanhou, is ons op pad na niks anders nie as 'n totalitêre staat.
But Dawie, I completely agree with you there. You've said it perfectly. Our proposal, if someone from government were to read it, were to see it, and were to be persuaded by it, that's fine, that's great. I agree with you. I don't think that that's very likely. I think we have a government at the moment who is loving the power grab. They're loving the bureaucratic influence and power that they're being able to grow now. And they can do it under the veil of legitimacy. If they did this in normal times, there would be far too much resistance. The purpose of our proposal is first and foremost, actually, certainly from my perspective, is to show people, to show influential thinkers outside of the government, to show people in business and people in civil society that there is a way to think about solving this problem that's not the hegemonic ANC idea, to show them that there's a better way. Why? Why is that important? Because we want to, what we need and what the ANC may respond to and has responded to in the past is a lot of pressure from civil society, from medium and large business, and even from overseas scrutiny from offshore. And we need to be able to show that there are other ways of dealing with this problem, and that their approach is not a sensible approach, is a damaging approach. And we've got to start. And so the idea is first and foremost to actually change the conversation, because it's precisely the risks you've just identified, Dawie, that we need to start flagging for people, telling them about, and showing them not only is there a better way, but your government is going in completely the opposite direction, and they're not going to give back those liberties and those freedoms very easily at all. So, that's our approach. I don't have high hopes for good ideas, at least at this stage, being implemented. My sincere hope, and I think this is maybe realistic, even though I'm as cynical as you, Dawie, about this power grab, is that things go so badly in May that the desperation levels rise so much that the legitimacy of the lockdown and the legitimacy of this ANC plan, I'm hoping, falls apart. And I guess our document is part of trying to delegitimize what we see as a very, very destructive policy. But you're absolutely right. The risk here is not the virus. The virus is nasty, and it's something we've all got to be a bit careful of. But the real risk here is the loss of civil liberties and the encroachment of a very, very totalitarian government. That's a huge worry for me.
Daniel, kan ek een of twee goed byvoeg daar wat Russell nou gesê het?
Asseblief, met die grootste liefde.
Ja, ek wil net die eerste opmerking maak met ekonomies wil met mekaar praat. Ekonomies is hartelose mense, hulle staan net in geldbelang, hulle gee mense se lewens om nie. Nou dit is een van die grootste foute wat mense maak. Ekonomies stel reeds mense se lewens belang, en dit is nie 'n geval dat ons kies teen mense lewens en vir die ekonomie byvoorbeeld nie. Ons kies vir mense se lewens, want die grootste killer daar buitekant is armoede. Armoede maak meer mense dood as al die ander nare goeders bymekaar. So deur die ekonomie in die gang te kry, gee eintlik vir mense 'n means to live, en die gee eintlik vir hulle lewe ook. Die tweede ding wat ek wil opmerking wat ek wil aansluit by Russell daar is dat wat ons gaan sien in die toekoms, en nou vat ek 'n kans hier, so ek wil graag hoor wat dink Russell. Wat ons gaan sien in die toekoms is meer staatsinmenging in elke denkbare ding. Maar ons het 'n staat wat ons almal weet baie swak is. Hulle is nie baie kompetent staat nie, hulle is oneffektief. Ons weet van korrupsieprobleme en alles. So ons gaan nou 'n staat kry wat die net weier gaan gooi in 'n poging om meer goederes in die ekonomie te beheer en te bestuur en oor te besluit. Maar in die proses, omdat hierdie net maar dun net is, gaan hierdie net oral skeur en oral gaan daar gate en gapings begin ontstaan, en dit gaan die geleentheid gee natuurlik vir ander mense om daardie gate te vul. En op 'n vreemde manier is dit dalk die goeie nuus hierso. Is dat ek het 'n vermoede dat kriminele elemente, kom ek gee jou 'n voorbeeld. Ons mag nou nie rook nie. Maar ek het gehoor dat as jy sigarette wil kry, dis baie maklik om sigarette te kry. Jy moet net bereid wees om die prys te betaal, want die onwettige sigarethandelaars is nou besig eintlik om hulle markaandeel sommer dramaties te verhoog en te vestig. En as ons nou uiteindelik weer mag rook, dan het jy nou ewe skielik die mark wat heeltemal anders te lyk, want hierdie ouens het hulle besigheid behoorlik gevestig terwyl niemand anders sigarette mag verkoop nie. Nou dis 'n voorbeeld van die staat wat inmeng, en in die proses het iemand anders daai vakuum gesien en homself behoorlik gaan vestig. Maar daar kan ook iets positiefs uitkom. Hierdie is die geleentheid met 'n staat wat in duie stort waar organisasies soos julle byvoorbeeld kan in die plek gaan instaan en vanuit dienste verrig wat die staat in die verlede wat veronderstel is om te verrig of dink hy kan verrig, maar dit nie kan doen nie. Maar ons die private sektor kan dit doen. So dit dink ek op 'n manier is eintlik die groot geleentheid wat geskep word deur hierdie krisis.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea, Dawie, and I think it's a good way to think positively about the direction that things are heading. And I think you're right. I think that our government we mustn't forget that they're not that strong. they do have a lot of weaknesses, and as they stretch themselves thinner here, we're going to see more and more incompetence. I suppose I would just flag two risks to your perhaps more optimistic reading of how it could potentially turn out, which is that when governments try to do these kinds of things, they may not be very efficient and very effective, but it's in the trying that they make a lot of mess ups and that they destroy a lot of things and a lot of value, because they have the ability to just meddle and to mess up corporate planning. So I'm concerned about the trying. I don't think they're going to succeed in their full task, but the trying is often quite damaging. And I think we've seen that in South Africa for the last 10, 15 years. The second risk, and this is something that's quite close to my heart at the moment, is how when the ANC decides on a particular strategy on something, how quickly and easily many businesses get on board with their plan, particularly big businesses. Now, I understand the challenges, the political challenges, the PR challenges that firms face. But what we've seen, I think, over the last 15 years and more, I think, really, is big business, but maybe even medium-sized business and small business kind of, in a way, it just has to follow, going along with the ANC plan and program. And so what's really frustrating is that despite a huge amount of incompetence in administration and bureaucracy, the government gets businesses to actually implement their policies, and the businesses implement it very, very efficiently. And BEE is a great example of that. If it was up to the government to manage BEE, they wouldn't be able to do it. They couldn't police that at all. But they very cleverly got big business to buy into it and to implement it very, very efficiently. So I want to believe your story, Dawie, and I think that it's not a bad story. And I think guys like Sakeliga can really take advantage of that story. But we've just also got to be careful of those other risks, and we've got to be really smart about how we manage the government now over the next few years.
Can I just say, I really like the idea of managing the government, though it's not something you'd hear in many other places in the world, but in South Africa, it's very appropriate. So I was wondering if we could take a couple of reader or listener questions while we had a moment here. So I see there's a lot of feedback on your economic plan, Russell. It seems that it's pretty popular. I see Bob Swart say mooi Russell and Dawie. Johan Stander say well done Russell. Theresa Nel say go van dit Russell, open economy in safe way for all but with rules. Ek dink ek stem met hulle saam. Dis 'n baie innoverende plan. Net so tussen ons, tussen ons is nou op die internet uitgesaai so ook, maar ons het nou vanoggend het ons gesels met die departement van handel en nywerheid. Jou plan, Russell, is voorgelê en is voorgestel as 'n benadering. Hulle hou van die idee. Nou is die groot vraag, gaan hulle polities dit kan afdwing? So ons sal maar kyk wat gebeur wat dit betref, maar ek glo daarom hulle sien ten minste die nut daarvan in. Dit beteken net wenig dat hulle die regte besluit gaan neem nie. So there are a lot of questions about the financing still of today's announcements of aid, etc., and particularly a lot of concerns about external financing, such as China and the IMF and the World Bank, and what that means in terms of our levels of debt and everything. Do you have any remarks to make on that, maybe, Russell, to start with? And then we'll get to you, Dawie.
I'll remark very quickly. Davie's probably got a few more thoughts than me. So Mr. Mboweni has been very thin on financing details. That's partly because, as Davie's pointed out, actually there's not that much financing, or there's not as much financing needed for the plan as many people think, because a lot of it's redirected spending and so on. But look, according to their plan, there is a lot of additional financing needed, and certainly given what we think is going to happen to tax revenues falling, as Dawie said, 200-300 billion rand, it's an absolutely spot on sort of estimate. I think it might even go worse than that. But it's certainly of that region, big decline in tax revenues this year. So the borrowing is going to have to come from somewhere. The question is, who's going to lend us money? Do the pension funds in South Africa have the money? Well, they would have to sell a lot of their stock portfolios to buy bonds. So that could crash the stock market. And then of course we really get into foreign loans. That's the IMF. That's maybe some sort of development banks, maybe China. Obviously, foreign bond investors can buy South African bonds. They can invest in our bond market in a sort of free market for bonds. But the problem with foreign investors is that they don't like South Africa risk anymore as much. They've got some yield to buy into here, but they don't really like our risk as much. But maybe more importantly, the rest of the world is in trouble. So everyone is actually selling their portfolios to try and raise cash in the United States, in the UK. And that's why we've seen outflows from the South African market. So what we're left with is a little bit of that kind of funding, but mainly trying to get it from our pension funds and trying to get it from the likes of the IMF or China or so on. And of course, the big problem there is not so much the conditions that are attached to those loans. I mean, that can be a problem, but in many ways, we would maybe welcome those conditions. I think the bigger problem might be just that you're taking on more debt and more foreign currency debt. And that can be a problem. You know, you have to pay the debt back in dollars, but your rand is maybe getting more vulnerable. And if they don't adhere to the, let's say, structural adjustment or the conditions of the lenders, maybe we start printing money, maybe the rand goes to 25 to the dollar, to 30 to the dollar, and then suddenly paying back those dollar loans becomes a little bit more difficult. We don't have a high foreign currency debt portion really yet. That's likely to grow through this crisis. But Davie's probably going to say, and I think I agree, that we can probably afford some foreign currency loans from some foreign institutions if we manage our currency prudently. Then we don't have to get into lots of trouble with that. So maybe we can raise the funding, but I think that 800 billion of new borrowing, which is what a 17% of GDP deficit will mean, is going to be very difficult to finance. And I think we may end up having to print money or cut spending and actually limit the size of government.
Daniel, ja, kan ek byvoeg daarby. As mens praat van ek weet hierdie IMF spook loop nou verskriklik rond. En almal praat van geld leen by die IMF en by die Wêreldbank en allerlei sulke goeders. Maar kom ons verstaan net mooi werk die meganika agter hierdie ding. Onthou nou, soos Russell gesê het, die staat se buitelandse skuld is maar minder as 10% van totale huishouding skuld. En dit is skuld wat oor 'n lang termyn terugbetaal moet word. Ons moet dit nie nou alles terugbetaal. Intussen sit die Reservebank met meer as $50 miljard in reserves alreeds. Die Reservebank het dit. So as iemand die opmerkinge maak sê ons moet gaan geld leen by die IMF byvoorbeeld, dan gaan leen jy nou maar sê nou maar jy gaan leen dollars, maar die eerste vraag wat jy moet antwoord as jy dollars gaan leen is wat wil ek met die dollars doen? Wat kan ek met dollars koop? Want jy moet onthou jy leen dollars, jy leen nie rande nie. Jy kan baie goeders in Suid-Afrika koop en ons het baie behoeftes in Suid-Afrika, maar jy leen dollars. En as jy dollars gaan leen, wat gaan jy koop? Wat wil jy invoer dan? En daar's nog niks wat ons wil invoer nie, of nie veel nie. Miskien 'n paar miljard rand se mediese goed of gewone goederes of die en daai, maar jy kan nie dollars gebruik vir 'n plaaslike stimulus nie. Dis die punt wat ek wil probeer maak. En jy het ook nie dollars nodig om plaaslike rande te maak nie. Die Reservebank dan maak dan nou rande uit niks uit nie sonder om dollars te hê. So ek dink dit is 'n spook wat jy rondloop dat ons nou moet gaan dollars leen. Daar is voordele aan, ek meen ons kan mediese goederes invoer. Dit is hoekom ons by die BRICS-bank 'n miljard rand gaan leen byvoorbeeld of $1 miljard gaan leen. Dit maak sin. Maar jy kan nie dollars leen om die plaaslike ekonomie te stimuleer. Want wat wil jy koop? Wat wil jy invoer? Wil jy nog van hierdie swart karre invoer waar die politici mee ry? Dit kan jy miskien doen, maar dit gaan nie vreeslik help om die Suid-Afrikaanse ekonomie te stimuleer. Dit gaan ander ekonomieë stimuleer. So ek dink hierdie ding oor die dollar of die IMF lening, dit is ek weet nie waar kom hierdie ding vandaan nie. Dit is werklik waar nie nodig om dollars te gaan leen nie. Wat ons wel nodig het is rande. En dit is die groot gevaar hierso. die rande, die pot goud wat oor is ongelukkig die pensioenfondse, en ek het 'n vermoede as ons aangaan teen hierdie tempo, gaan jy nie meer geld kan leen in rande nie, of die opbrengskoerse gaan te hoog wees, en uiteindelik dink ek dat die pensioenfondse gaan in die spervuur kom, en ek sal glad nie verbaas wees as ons een of ander voorgeskrewe bate net om die draai gaan sien nie. So, en dis my volgende stap wat gaan gebeur, een of ander voorgeskrewe bate. En dan, ek sien ons tyd is besig om te maak, net 'n vinnige laaste opmerking. Hierdie partytjies eindig altyd op dieselfde manier, en dit is met hoë inflasie. So die volgende teiken, die pensioenfondse, die spaarders, en dan die teiken daarna is jou geld in.
Hierdie was 'n baie interessante gesprek geweest, soos Dawie nou opmerk, ons staan hierso aan die einde van ons tyd. So ek gaan ons sprekers vra, Dawie het 'n vinnige opmerking daar aan die einde gemaak. Is daar enige ander opmerkings, slotopmerkings wat jy sou wil maak op hierdie punt?
Ja, ek wil net twee goeie sê, wat die politiek aan betref, jy moet altyd verwag van politici om 'n krisis te gebruik om hulle eie mag uit te verbreed en te vestig, en ek dink dit is iets wat ons almal baie bedag op moet wees, dat die politici hierdie mag wat hulle vir hulself toeëien, dat hulle dit gaan teruggee. En onvermydelik dink ek in die proses gaan die staat ook groter word in die proses. En dan 'n algemene ekonomiese opmerking wat ek mee geëindig het net nou, hierdie partytjies soos ek sê eindig altyd in inflasie. En ek het 'n vermoede dat ons gaan oor die volgende klompie maande en jare al meer en meer druk op die Reserwebank sien om allerlei monetêre goeders te doen, om uiteindelik gaan lei tot hoër inflasie, en hoër inflasie op die einde van vernietig jou geldeenheid, en soos daai bord daar agter Russell se kop sê, inflasie vernietig uiteindelik nasies ook.
Any remarks from your side, Russell?
I was just going to say that Davie's actually summed up, I think, this discussion perfectly. He's spoken about the right kind of risks, and I don't have anything to add. I think that was a great summing up by Dawie.
Excellent. Okay, baie dankie vir almal wat ingeskakel het. Hierdie video bly natuurlik beskikbaar, so deel dit gerus met jou vriende en kollegas as hulle 'n bietjie onseker is of wonder oor waar presies gaan ons heen wat hierdie goeders betref. Hierdie was 'n uitstekende gesprek geweest van my kant af. Ek kan net my waardering uitspreek vir ons twee vooruitstaande uitnemende gaste, Dawie Roodt en Russell Lamberti. Skakel gerus op 'n ander stadium weer in by Sakeliga se media. Ons het op 'n gereelde basis hierdie tipe voorleggings en webinare en besprekings om in hierdie onsekere tye daarom 'n klein bietjie meer advies en raad daar te stel vir jou. Maar soos altyd, baie dankie vir jou tyd en teenwoordigheid. Sien gou weer.
Dankie. Cheers, Russell.